Thank you to Posh Redneck, Jay Dyer, and Matt Erickson who are joining us today to answer the most important question on the internet today. Is Jay Dyer a friend or a fed? Now, to clarify some terms here, friend, of course, means someone who's been benefiting humanity in general, whose work and whose contributions have extended conversations, have elevated humanity in some way, shape, or form, or who is just a darn nice human being. And of course, a fed is a dirty schmuck, someone who is doing the work of all the evil people, whether they're on the payroll or off the payroll. Because as Matt Erickson once famously said, you don't have to be on the payroll to do the work of the fed. Now, interesting story, and this is why this is the finale of the series. This whole concept of friend or fed started in a Matt Erickson King Pill Discord conversation with a super fan of Jay Dyer, who once claimed that Jay Dyer is a fed based on Matt Erickson's statement that you don't have to be on the payroll to be a fed. And I was part of that conversation. And when I heard that, I was like, well, heck, if Jay Dyer can be a fed, then anybody could be a fed. And then I did the Curtis Yarvin friend or fed, and off we went down that road. So now that we have Jay Dyer, the topic is Jay Dyer, friend or fed, and we have Jay Dyer on the show. We have broken the meta. We have come full circle. I feel like we have completed the journey of the series. And thank you, gentlemen, for being part of this historic internet moment.
You're saying the person was a hater and now is a fan?
I don't believe he's a fan, Jay. I mean, we'd have to ask him. But
I was trying to understand what you said. You said he's not. He's the way it was worded. I didn't understand. What did you say?
Sorry, someone who was not a fan of yours was part of that conversation on Matt's, on Matt's Discord. Matt, you know the gentleman I'm speaking of. We won't have to name names, but I doubt he's had a Jay Dyer moment. Perhaps. I mean, maybe this show will cure him of it.
Did he present evidence? What's the evidence that I'm a fed? I always want to know because a lot of people like to. Everybody calls everybody a fed. So what's the evidence?
Well, this is part of the series, right? The series is kind of playing with that kind of concept where everyone gets called a fed, and oftentimes, based on what Matt's said about it, is that because you don't have to be on the payroll to do the fed, to be part of the fed. I think the attack often then becomes is that you are, in some ways, in shape or form, doing the work of the fed by exposing by your attacks on, let's say, the Roman Catholics or other interest groups, or by exposing, let's say, conspiracy theories, or doing some of your other work that somehow is actually doing the work of the fed, even though you may or may not be on the payroll. So I think that's the accusation, and I would seems to be go ahead.
I would say that in Jay's case, most likely what happens with most people is they decide that they think he's a big meanie head. And so then they have to kind of retroactively come up with some sort of a justification for why he's not just a big meanie head. It's not just a personal thing. It's actually he's big uber bad guy in general, whether it's he's turning people away or, contra all the evidence, or he's distracting you with these conspiracies and stuff that don't matter, whatever sort of weird thing they come up with. But I think it really comes back to people just think that he's a big meanie head. And I know when I first started listening to you, Jay, probably, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago, something like that. I first started and I was kind of like, oh man, he's really combative with people. This is almost uncomfortable sometimes. I don't know. And so I stopped listening for a little bit. And then my dad, who is totally the opposite temperamentally to me, usually he's the one who doesn't like people who are combative. He was like, you need to listen to this Jay Dyer guy. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll listen to him some more. And after listening to, I don't know, 500 hours worth of Jay Dyer, I realized that he is actually extraordinarily patient. He is extraordinarily accommodating because he has had these same conversations a million times, and he's willing to still sit there and go through all of them, which is a great service to the rest of us for not having to do it. We could just say he's done it.
Well, those kind words, appreciate that. Somebody said, "Is it a drug rug?" It's actually not.
Your mic's peaking a little bit.
It's actually not a drug rug. It's something that we bought at a surf shop in somewhere in like Tampa Bay or something. So no, it's not. It's Destin. Excuse me. It's not. It's actually a.
Well, we all know that Tampa
It
Bay
looks
is just
kind of
code
like a
for
drug.
Fed first. Gentlemen, we're here
can I
to...
throw in my 5
Of course.
pence? So I know Jay, he and I communicate by lying on big pink beds on our bellies and talk over landlines and listen to nightcore versions of 2010's white girl music, which is the highest form of koinonia for all of us Orthodox. So I have not felt, a Fed vibe from it.
Of course, Posh, that calls in question if you're a Fed, because I mean, what's been called into question by gentlemen like Joe Wilson, Don Bacon, and Austin Scott, when they signed a letter to Pam Bondi making the accusation that there's a Russian agents inside ROKOR and other Slavonic churches within the United States. Hey, we might all be Feds in some way, shape, or form. We might be, or at least agents. Maybe we should call it. We could have come up with an acronym for agents.
There's fools for the Lord, and fools for Christ, and then there's Feds for Christ.
That's for Christ.
And there's also fools for Feds that work for the Feds.
Yes, exactly. Not really high on the canonization priorities, but
Well, I guess if if the government is saying that we're potentially all Russian agents, that means that I'm not that's a good argument against me being a U.S. Fed, right?
You could be a double agent, though, Jay.
Oh.
I mean, you
what's it
It
called?
just seems there's no way to
Russian
prove that you're not an
vibe.
agent, right? Like no matter what you present, there's no proof, because anything that's counter evidence just means that you're working for the other side or double agent. So it's sort of it's a unfalsifiable accusation that you work for the government.
And it's also kind of a when did you stop beating your wife sort of a
It
thing
is,
too. Because if
exactly.
you tried to defend yourself and say, no, I'm not a Fed, well, that's what a Fed
Well,
would
why
say.
you defend yourself? You must be a Fed.
Right.
Only the real Messiah would deny his true divinity. He's the old Monty Python bit.
So let's run down your list of critics here, Jay. It was just over the last year. On my short list, and anyone can add to this, is Sam Shamoun of the Orbs, Trent Horn, the members of the True Orthodoxy or True Orthodox Church, liberal OCA priests, and Brother Nathaniel. An interesting thing about Brother Nathaniel is that we don't have to really worry about him so much anymore. Sorry, let me just do this. He's removed himself now from ROKOR. In a letter he's just published on X, Brother Nathaniel says, to my letter to ROKOR bishops, you have all forced the ROKOR flock on December 10th, 2025 into sharing the same cup with BP Saba of the Antiochians, who says the heretical monophysites share the same faith as Orthodox Christians. This is apostasy. Thus, in honor of the holy martyr patriarch Flavian, who was beaten to death by the monophysites by the robber council, I can no longer stay in the ecumenist uncompromised church of ROKOR. I am now with faithful bishops and priests who are loyal to the Orthodox faith. My monastic tonsure stays intact. My social media postings against Jews on X and my videos on Rumble continue, and my street evangelism stays strong. There's nothing you can do to me. Plan as you may. As heads of the Sanhedrin, all you need to know is the Lord Jesus Christ, His Holy Mother, and the Patriarch Flavian are protecting me from your evil plans. You have no authority over me, as I am a faithful Orthodox Christian, and follow the Lord Jesus Christ and the ecumenical councils. I formally leave ROKOR today. Monk Nathaniel, aka Brother Nathaniel.
Well, it's interesting he doesn't say. It's interesting that he doesn't say who his bishops are or who he's underneath. So who knows if that's even the case. But I mean, far more damaging than what he thinks of me or anyone else is the fact that he says in his tweets, there's no such thing as theosis.
Let me read that. There is no theosis taught in the Bible, just simple everyday things like helping others out, but glitched out.
Priests hypnotize their underlings with slogans.
Yeah, that's proper rubbish. like
Yeah, I
not
mean,
even the
imagine being a
Catholics would
monastic
say such a thing.
for 20 years monasticism and you don't know Orthodox theology 101. I mean, to me, that says actually loon fed, you know, that's all the
Well, he wears
possibilities.
like he wears like 3 crosses on himself when he's doing his videos. I know someone pointed that out, and he's wearing like 2 or 3 crosses constantly. It's like
I mean, it should have been
you
obvious
only
that
do
he was a
one,
clown
right?
a long time ago.
Yes.
I've never understood why anybody follows that guy.
Well, have you heard his song, his cover of, or adaptation of Rings of Fire about hell and homosexuality? Because if you haven't, I'll send it to you and you will understand why people followed.
Why people what?
Why people followed him. He
This is
does a
that song.
banger cover.
He seems
I'll
to be
send
doing
you I'll send you the song. You will know what I meant now.
he seems to be doing the spirit of the age thing, which is blame the Jews for everything, right? Blame Jews and blame Israel, and by blaming them, give them all the power, which is something that Matt and you and I have talked about exhaustively. Which is like, why are you if you believe that Israel's this evil power, why do you keep giving them power constantly? Like it's at some point it becomes like Jew envy, and it's getting a little disturbing. Like,
Yeah,
you know.
There's nowhere I hear more about Jews than from all the people who can't stand them. And I'm no great fan of Jews, but I'm like, I'm so unfond of them that I just don't want to hear about them. I don't want to be inundated with this just constantly every day. And I think that's probably why Brother Nathaniel picked up the audience that he did by and large. And if you characterize yourself that way, if that's your brand, you really get locked into that brand and you get audience captured bad. So he seems like he's kind of a boomer lib who had this hobby horse, and who knows whether it was a sincere approach or not, whether he actually believed in it or he's just trying to gin up engagement. But I'm seeing a lot of people spiraling that way right now, and it's like Jason's saying, it's just like reverse worship of when you scapegoat them, that's a form of worshiping them.
Yeah, there's a level at which you start ascribing too much power to one thing, and obviously there's a Fed element that is there to constantly compromise your ability to rationally talk about Jewish actors, like the recent thing with the purchase of TikTok and Paramount. That's something you can actually critique. But if you just scream, Jews and the media, there's no place for rational thought. And Jay knows this person, Kurt Metzger. He describes it as, being like a human fart. And you're there to ruin the actual ability by to talk about things by stinking everything up. And I think that's obviously people can legitimately crash into that and start only talking about Jews. And I think you're missing out many vectors that are very prevalent. But that's a Fed option, a schizo option. And to me, what Brother Nathaniel did there seems like he was looking for an excuse to get out of the canonical boundaries of Orthodoxy. And you made.
I don't even think he was, though. I mean, there's already been several Rocor statements and bishop statements over the years that we don't really recommend or recognize this guy. The Rocor said something like maybe 6 to 8 months ago about him that sort of dismissed him. So I've never, nobody's ever really understood like what or where his monastery is. And I mean, you can't really be a monk without being under some headship.
Well, to my knowledge, he was still being accepted by he had been part of Rocor, left Rocor, or been tossed out of Rocor and came back in at some point. But to your point, I don't know where he came back in or how he's being recognized or what monastery he's attached to. It seems to be kind of a misnomer, but he's been one of your more vocal critics. From reading this tweet, it seems like he's we'll see what happens, but it seems like he's joining up with Archbishop Greg with the True Orthodox group, and now that's also another group that's been highly critical of UJ. And I'm sort of digging into it. I was just part of your was was part of a voice group over on your Discord. I'm talking to someone who had found themselves participating with a true Orthodox group, and he understands they're schismatic, and he's trying to pull himself away out of that. To be part of the bigger conversation, this is sort of the danger right now that I see, because Orthodoxy is growing, right? Orthodoxy certainly is getting headlines. We got clips and video clips we can play of people coming into the church and the church expanding. As people are being brought in, however, they're not necessarily understanding of different schismatic groups, because they throw Orthodoxy on there, and everyone goes, well, it's Orthodox Church, it's near me, I was going to go to that Orthodox Church. So maybe we can talk a little bit about who are these true Orthodox guys, because I was completely in the dark of this until about mid-year, where I saw some of them were attacking you. And I'm like, wait, what is going on? And then had to investigate it from that perspective. But if someone just is shopping around for churches, they see Orthodox, they go to Orthodox Church, and then they find out they're too late, that they're part of a schismatic false church who's not receiving the true communion.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Orthodox version of sedevacantism, if you're a Roman Catholic. And it's really not worth giving a whole lot of time and attention to these kinds of groups. Something I've learned over several years is the more attention and sort of response that you give to a lot of these groups, it sort of feeds into it, and they feel themselves to be really self-important, when in reality this is a very minuscule, tiny fraction of people. It's not a real movement. They talk about having a synod, and then they'll put up pictures on the internet of one guy who's dead and another guy who was the synod. So it's like trailer parks, 5 people here and there. It's not real synods. A lot of mentally unstable people, a lot of people who are schizophrenic, literally a lot of people who are sort of spurgy, and they recognize that there's real issues with ecumenism, and the assumption, the solution is, I'll go start my own parallel ecclesiastical structure. But that's where you get into schism, and with the church fathers, we don't typically see that. There's, number one, there's procedures to when there's problems in the church. You don't just immediately sort of react in a reactionary way, try to set up your own jurisdiction or try to get ordained and create your own thing. That's exactly what the sedevacantists did with what's called wandering bishops, or the episcopi vagantes. And if you get into that, if you study the history of that, whether it's old Catholics, whether it's Anglicans, whether it's sedevacantists, Roman Catholics, or whether it's these fake branches of Orthodoxy, you'll find that that's rife with actual feds, spooks, and kooks. So it's a world of as we said, wandering bishops that's not even worth people spending their time in.
I would like to say something. We had this schismatic bishop not too long ago in Serbia. He's dead now, but he split over the was it 2015 Cyprus Synod, like some type of ecumenical gathering, and he got rather upset about that. Same thing as true Orthodox, like that type of thinking. But since I'm from Serbia and I am privy to a lot of internet conversations, you might not have this yet. God willing, it will come. By that I mean Orthodox will spread to a lot of people, and some of them will just go via osmosis. But people develop all sorts of theories. One was that it's an act of apostasy to have a 4-part choir, because you should only have one voice singing, and it should only be men. So if you have a 4-part choir, you're not really worshiping God. So that's the levels it goes to. And, a lot of people from cradle Orthodox countries, we are very attuned to that type of apostasy, because people who go more liberal, they tend to just, not even take anything seriously. The ones who take everything seriously, and by seriously I mean schizophrenically, and with no ability to discern anything, just rigidity, like a Pharisaic rigidity, and I tell them, just slap a phylactery on your head, you're halfway there already. People are attuned to that type of behavior. But that's what you get. We had that here. Then obviously the bishop dies and everyone scatters, basically. Because it is the same thing with Protestantism. You have a very charismatic pastor. The moment he dies, everything falls apart. Because it's not actually the church. It's just, demons like to pry both into liberal and conservative impulses and, try to bend them any way they can into splintering the church and causing it harm.
Pharisees and Sadducees.
Yeah. And Jesus focuses on the Pharisees. Everyone talks about, you see, he doesn't criticize the liberals. No, he focuses on the Pharisees because they're closer to the truth.
Yeah.
But then, he corrects them. And the Sadducees are just out there winging it. They deny everything except the Pentateuch, no afterlife, no resurrection, no nothing. So they're just so far out that there's barely any reason to talk to them. But the Pharisees are close enough that you can modify it, at least try to get them to understand.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting thing that God just brought up in a recent conversation, is that technically the Pharisees didn't do anything wrong. Like in terms of how they were addressing the letter of the law. However, they were missing the entire point. Like, it's like, yes, okay, fine, you're doing all the things, but you're doing an empty service. So it doesn't matter that you're doing the things, you're doing it with the wrong spirit. Right. You're doing it with the wrong intention. So therefore it's hollow.
Jesus says you have the power to loose and bind, but you only ever bind and never loosen. So you keep just putting on these regulations upon regulations, and ultimately that power is taken from them, given to the apostles, and the whole seat of Moses thing and all that lovely ecclesiastical stuff.
I can't get over the notion of 4-part harmony being like some sort of degenerate jigaboo music.
Yeah, you might as well have dubstep.
Skrillex in the temple, man.
Yeah.
I did some digging. I think I understand maybe why some of the attacks on Jay Dyer is happening.
Remember, a lot of people that are in the Orthodox world, they're also on meds, and I'm being 100% serious. Like, there are people that are on SSRIs. A lot of the people in the Orthodox world are unstable mentally. And it makes sense. I mean, the church is a hospital, so it's going to attract all kinds of people that need help. But even in the monastic world, too, there are people who have mental problems in the monastic world. So people need to be aware of this, that when you go to the Orthodox Church, it is a haven, it's a refuge, it's a hospital for sinners, but there's going to be crazy people. There's going to be people at your church that are literally on meds and insane. There's going to be people that try to fight you. There's going to be people that punch you in the face if you're me.
So maybe we can speak to this, because you obviously listed strong responses, Jay, and part of this whole ortho bro movement that's been decried from, let's say, from the Greeks and others as well, and has been sort of a consternation in certain Orthodox circles. I can understand why, in terms of some of the worst representatives of Orthodoxy are on X and social media, to the point where you can question if they're actually Orthodox, or if they're actually have gone through some sort of strict catechism. But I think there's another aspect of it, which is you're getting to the point, and you're hitting them hard, and you're doing the work that many people think they ought to be doing, because you're bringing more people into the church one way or the other. It is certainly through debate, where I've been off and on the status of debate. However, it's just one avenue, right? It's one thing that brings people in, and if it brings people in, it brings people in. We're here to set the table. We don't convert people. Christ does that, but we can set the table, and you've been extremely effective at setting that table. So I'm wondering if, and maybe you can speak on this from a personal level, if some of that strong responses to you is both just the adversary in general working through people, but also that sense of pride. Because when we get into like liberal OCA priests and all the rest of it, we won't have to name names, but they seem to be reacting to you strongly, almost because you're doing the thing that they can't do, or they've been not as effective of doing as you have.
Yeah, probably all the above would be my guess. I mean, that comment on that live stream was actually directed not so much at clergy or people that I've had issues with. It was more so with laity and people that I've encountered and people that have been kind of continuous online harassers. That was really about those people. For example, there was an individual who constantly harassed for about 5 years. And then it turned out that he admitted that he was schizophrenic and that he was no longer in the church. Who knows if he even was? So, you get these people who, do this kind of stuff. They get these fixations because of whatever reasons. They feel slighted from a debate. They feel like they're justified because they think I'm too mean or whatever. Um, and then, and also, you got people that in America, especially, a lot of people are on SSRIs, and so they're unstable people. That's prescribed way, too much in my view. So a lot of these people who are addicted to these things and they're on psychotropic drugs, they're in the church, they have other issues going on. Um, it's just part of, I guess, Western living. So you're gonna have those kinds of people, which didn't have anything really to do with what I was talking about with clergy. That was totally separate stuff. But in regard to clergy, probably they feel like they get put in difficult positions because a lot of the stuff that we've dealt with has been pretty high tier Roman Catholic, Muslim, Protestant theological issues, and some of them are pretty difficult. So if you're not well studied in theology and you get people coming to the church and they've got a lot of theology questions, it puts you in a weird position. Then you're forced to say, well, Jay Dyer said this, and then you have to say, well, blah 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 blah. Don't listen to people on the internet. Well, if I don't listen to people on the internet, then I wouldn't have come to the Orthodox Church. So why are you telling me not to listen to people on the internet? So it just creates odd situations that I don't think anybody expected either. Like none of us expected for the audience to grow like it did, and none of us expected to be in a position just yapping on YouTube to focus so many people's possibilities for coming to the Orthodox Church in terms of what they considered as potentialities for their lives. It happened. Here we are. I'm not sure what the best means and methods is to handle it, but it is what it is. As you saw, yeah, that AP article video just went up. I saw that yesterday, but
let's
yeah,
just play this. Let's just play this briefly because I think this is actually kind of edifying, especially for the online Orthodox sphere. We've done, Matt, you were on the conversation we had with Luigi, Ben Luigi, and
Cleve.
Cleve to Antiquity, where we talked about the Ortho-Bro movement, and certainly this is the attacks I find are interesting because you could expect the attacks from Roman Catholics and Protestants, right? Like that seems to be normal, like that you kind of expect that, but there's also attacks from within the church, which I find interesting to put it mildly.
There's
no sound if you're wanting to play.
I don't know if we can do much about that. Unfortunately, because it's from X, I can only boost it so much.
There's no sound at all.
There's no sound at all.
No.
Okay. Well, hang on a second. We'll fix that. But it's essentially what the article is talking about is people coming to the church from online sources. So,
while you're fixing that, I actually had something I was going to say was related to that.
Yep. No, go ahead.
You were the one that really kind of brought me back around to the whole like debate world, because that was what really brought me to the church. Ultimately, was listening to theology debates, and I consumed all of my listening to stuff time with that for a few years, and then I kind of burned out on it and sort of moved into other aspects of my life, and it was kind of like I'd heard all of these conversations, and the conversations weren't really getting new. It was just kind of covering the same ground over and over again. And so I kind of checked out on it for a while. But Jason, you were the one who several months ago, you said there's a lot of utility to this, because we're kind of in like a frame breaking time where lots of people's frames are breaking. And there's lots of minds that are sort of kind of rising out of the haze and looking around and being like, what am I doing here? What's going on? Looking and now starting to search for truth, but they don't even really know where. And sometimes they don't even know that they're searching for truth. They're just kind of passively consuming content because that's what our generation does. And so it's important that we have our guys representing our positions in all different facets of society. So we're meeting people wherever they are. So if people are showing up to, to some podcast with a bunch of OnlyFans chicks to listen to that, but they can stumble across the gospel there, well, hey, great. That's where they were spending their time, and they stumbled across the gospel there, and then they can pick up that thread and follow it along.
Wait. Are you saying that you might not want to exactly condemn, sitting down with like prostitutes and sinners?
Indeed, right? Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
I see. Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Interesting theory.
I don't know about those lepers though. Those lepers kind of creep me out. But other than that, I mean,
Tradition of washing hands and stuff, it gets pretty dicey.
But here's something you can talk about, Jay, because I feel that you're almost a victim of your own success in terms of in terms of debating, because you've now said you're kind of done debating the Roman Catholics, for example. You've done Trent Horn, you've done a few notable Roman Catholic debates just this year, both on Tim Pool and other locations, and it's you've kind of run that ground. Like once you've exposed. One thing I'll shine your shoes a bit is I was sleeping on Vatican II. I knew Vatican II. I knew what it was in general, but I didn't know the extent of what Vatican II really was preaching, especially in terms of we're all worshiping the same God. I feel that's a complete and total defeater for the Roman Catholics. Like there's no way back out of that because they have no other authority other than the Pope. So they're kind of stuck in their rigid hierarchical structure. It's like, well, and as you just did with the Trent Horn video recently, where Trent Horn's is like, what is his comment was everything remind me it's everything that's is irrefutable is obvious, or something to that effect. It's like this complete and total circular argument that the RCs find themselves in. And I feel this is like the underskirting of why people are leaving those churches and coming to Orthodoxy, because they're finding that you go there, you get the smoke machines, you get the bridge over troubled water, or John Lennon's Imagine, or this bad theology, and they can't get out of it. Like there's no escape other than Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy becomes the golden parachute for them.
Well, the thing to point out first is that it's extremely historically ignorant to say that debate is bad. I mean, the church fathers extensively debated all the time. They debated their opponents across the board, whether they were atheists, pagans, whether they were Nestorians, whether they were Nophysite, whether they were schismatics. Like debates are a massive portion of these, patristic writings up here. And not everybody was a bishop that engaged in these debates. So, there's nothing inherently wrong with debate. Proverbs talks about debating our cause with our neighbor. There's many places in Wisdom of Sirach. There's many places in the Deuterocanonical text that talks about the advantage of debating, hashing out issues, etc. So it's a lot of ignorance, I think, that would lead somebody to say that debate is inherently bad. And probably for a lot of people, it comes from a place of kind of insecurity, or they feel like they don't have that. It's just, there's going to be haters if you're talented at something. I don't really care that much about debate. Honestly, it's not my favorite thing to do. I will do it. It's enjoyable at times. It does get old. So certainly it's not the, essence of the faith. It's not what it's all about. But it is necessary to have people out here defending the position. And it surprises me that more Orthodox people were not, when I started doing this kind of stuff, that more people weren't doing it, because, if you know the other positions very well, like Protestantism or Catholicism or Islam, they're not that hard to debate or to argue against. So it does work. It is effective. Everybody can see that now. And it also is not necessary to always be putting on a nice face or to put on pretenses, especially if that's not who you really are. Some people are actually made to be aggressive, to be aggro. If you look at the book of Acts, St. Paul debates daily in the synagogues against the Jews, trying to prove that the Messiah is Christ from the scriptures. So there's nothing inherently wrong with debating. It's all throughout the scriptures. So it speaks, I think, more to insecurities or deficiencies in the people who would question it if you're really, deep into the patristic and theological context of first 1,000 years of Christianity. Like it would be just preposterous to say that debating is somehow bad. It just doesn't make any sense. But beyond that, also, it's just one tool, one arena, one area. It's a signpost. It's not the essence of what Orthodox Christianity is by far.
I'd like to add another potential, vector of why people might be so opposed to debates. One is general nicety. Because we've lost Christianity as the foundation of civilization. Now we have niceties. We have good manners, and that's about it. And debates can get quite rowdy. I think that's one of them. Maybe the whole fear of interreligious, strife and violence. Maybe that. But I think also a very important one for America is this very Protestant-y view of converting people. Matt used the phrase earlier. Jesus converts people. Right? We don't convert people. I haven't converted a single person in my life. That's true, but we're also not monergists, and I call it tactical monergism when I ascribe whatever I do right. Oh, that's just God doing it, but then you use excuses for the things you're maybe not so fond of admitting. But it's not about just being academic. There are different troubles that people face depending on the time of their life, the area they're from, etc., etc. Sometimes it's intellectual boundaries that keep, you have to deal with this scientific theory, or this historic, explanation doesn't really work out as far as So you need intellectual input in order to, do away with that. But sometimes, obviously, it's just spiritual. It's just that you're trying to make excuses for sin. It's not that simple. And that monergism, tactical monergism, jumps in when you don't feel like doing something. You say, well, I leave it up to God. I will pray for you, in a smiley face. I think those things are combined, because I remember back in high school, we had a shift in teachers. We had this thing, once a week you would pick either to go to religious studies for a class or civics for a class once a week. And we got this woman who was who had a master's in philosophy and specifically went for Orthodox studies. Great woman, very humble, the type who had no jewelry, no nothing, but she was very, very nice. And with me in class was this fellow who was in the same grade, who got into the whole new atheist thing. And both of us being teenagers at the time, he got very rowdy, not in any inappropriate sense, but in the argumentative sense. And, me as a fellow classmate, I did nothing, and he would just say, well, why does this, he said, I think, why is the mark of Cain black skin or something like that, because he heard that online, obviously. So at one point I snap and I start arguing with him. And obviously his arguments were rubbish, so it wasn't a big achievement for me, but it showed that her timidity, especially as a woman, extraordinarily appropriate on her end. But then you also need someone to be more aggressive at certain points. Because again, demons are very multifaceted and will get at any angle, try to make you more timid, try to make you more aggressive, try to make you more argumentative, whatever it takes for you to fumble. So we also, as members of the church, need to have different talents utilized. Some are just diplomatic, others more, again, argumentative. and there's a place for it. There is no singular approach, and it's not also shouting at people to repent and accept Christ. Like, what do you think you're doing? That's part of Jesus converts. You just throw like a hand grenade there, and if it explodes, it's Jesus who done it. So I think those are also the factors that play into the whole way of thinking.
Well, I think we've been cursed with since is this sort of idea of Jesus meek and mild, right? So you have almost two Christs being debated. I've broken it down to saying, like, a lot of people worship Bob Christ. They venerate Bob Christ or Moishi Christ. Bob Christ is a heck of a guy. He's super nice, lovely guy to have over dinner. He's going to bring the fish and the wine, and God bless him. But he's not Christ. He's not truly Jesus. And this seems to be permeating through most of the Protestant churches or the non-denominational yada 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 churches in the West, and that seems to be what's dying out. Here in Australia, like for example, my parish just bought an Anglican church that basically had no attendees. That's happening across Australia, and Australia was an Anglican country for a very long time, and it's dying out. Like, there's just nobody left to go to these churches. In fact, when they were looking into buying churches down here for our parish, it was like they were like, "Which Anglican church would you like?" There's many on offer, right? So this is happening. It's not just conjecture on the internet. A lot of these churches are dying out, but yet the faithful, people who want to have a connection to Christian or to Christianity or religion, that's not dying out. In fact, that's getting stronger. So this is kind of where we get to, if we're going to say that the debate is wrong, then my patron Saint Elijah, the prophet Elijah, is wrong. He basically he torched people who are leading the country astray. What I think people are not dealing with on some level is how late it is in the game. I always finish every stream off, which is it's with the quote from Father Servan Rose. It's later than you think. It's much later than we think. Like, this whole Western civilizational, let's say global secular state is collapsing in real time. And it's up to us, or anyone who's listening to this, to get on it now. Like, there's no more waiting game left. This is happening. And if your state is basically been controlled by demons, which is pretty obvious, then it's on us to do something. And if we don't do anything, then that's also on us.
I work for Andrew Wilson, and he in a debate called someone a snake. And I talked to him afterwards, and he said, that's not very Christ-like. Jesus called people dens of snakes. So he was nicer than Jesus, if you can imagine it. And that especially one of my favorite things is the whole Elijah episode with the prophets of Baal. Just mogging them.
and after he mogged them, and after the fire came down from heaven and consumed the sacrifices, I think a lot of people don't read the rest of that passage, because then Elijah and the people took them down, and Elijah slaughtered all of them, literally killed them all.
He does that a bit.
Yeah.
And can I say fire of heaven isn't actual fire, it's lightning.
Lightning, yeah.
So
yeah.
It's not a pillar of fire. There are pillars of fire, it's just not fire of heaven. That you can see how someone gets from lightning to calling it fire of heaven.
Right.
Not many leaps and bounds to understanding the phraseology. But yeah, like Saint Elijah, and even Saint Elijah at one point falters, right, and says, "God, just take me. I can't take this anymore." Because his whole people basically have fallen into such depths of depravity and demon worship that even he couldn't handle it. And he was in a desert, so he wasn't, in the very midst of it. So we have to understand that he wasn't spagging out. He was doing his job very well, actually. But I hate just the whole nicety. Now, we shouldn't take, well, Jesus called people vipers, so I get to say, get to go full Shamounian on them. That's also that's the other extreme of things. But that it's not just
your mother was doing muta with the Shia, you son of the devil.
I can't but help find that funny. I'm sorry.
Let's deal with Sam Shamoun for a second. And
You ready for the next song?
Sam Shamoun on the dance floor. Sam Shamoun, dance club. He's single. Put a dust on his shoulder. Because he didn't clean up his nasty ass cat apartment.
Here we go.
Sam Shamoun is on. Ladies, orbs, all are welcome.
All are welcome, ladies and orbs. It's orbs on the dance floor.
Orbs. Well, it's because you seem to having this. Bring it back to you, Jay, for a second. You seem to have this effect, right? I think there's a Trent Horn effect as well, where and again, the victim of your own success in terms of debate, where you debate these gentlemen, and you destroy them, and you destroy their worldview so concisely that they go crazy to the point where they're starting to see orbs. Let's get to the Sam Shamoun situation a little bit, but I feel that this is indicative of these half in, half out Orthodox people. I don't like the accusations of you're not true Christian, Orthodox, etc. I don't have the authority to say that, and I also don't. I think that's thrown around even more than Fed in certain circles. But it does seem to be a thing, right? Where I mean, we just had the recent. Remind me of his name. There was just that scandal with
Voice of Reason
Prophet.
Oh, Red Vaughn,
right. Where Red Vaughn comes in, he says he's going to be Orthodox, and then of course, goes off his own way, right? I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that as this is sort of a Father Seraphim Rose point of view, Orthodoxy and religion in the future. But as we're moving into this period where Orthodoxy becomes more clickable in some ways, in one way it's good. It's going to bring people to the church, which is great, but it's also going to bring in a lot of people who maybe don't belong. And I hate to say that, because it's not so much that Orthodoxy isn't for you, it just maybe that Orthodoxy isn't for you yet, and that seems to be a big sticking point.
That will happen.
I don't know if you,
No, it's a great point. We've seen that a lot. It happened to me in 2007 when I almost came in. I went through the catechumenate, but I wasn't ready to become Orthodox yet. So I had a lot of, Thomistic and even still probably perhaps Augustinian Calvinistic baggage back then that I just didn't understand how to rework it and retool the whole system and make it work. And even right now, we see Latinizing people who are young converts that are kind of in the same position I was in back in 2007. And, it takes a long time to work through a lot of these issues, even if you spend a lot of time reading theology. So even somebody like myself that put a lot of time in my 20s into that, like, it was still, taking me a lot of time to work through. And also, it's not all intellectual. It's also beyond just the books and the figuring it out. There's a lot of personal growth, maturation that people have to go through. You have to go through some hard times. You got to go through people dying. You got to go through stuff that happens as you get older. That also is part of, I think, becoming Orthodox, as I'm sure you guys could relate. So we will unfortunately see people who, come in, they get fascinated, they see a fad, a trend, and then they, go to the liturgy, they have a bad experience with a priest, something like that, and then they decide it's bad. That kind of stuff is going to happen. There's going to be people who just, don't want to do it, or feel like they've been sold a bad, a lemon. There's all kinds of possibilities here, but overall, I think still, the majority of the people that tend to move into the direction of Orthodoxy tend to be pretty serious. I think the great thing about Orthodoxy is that also it's pretty good at filtering out bad apples, because, it takes time. You can't just, like a Southern Baptist, walk down the aisle and, Billy Graham hands you pieces of pizza and you say the sinner's prayer and you're saved, right? Like it's a lot more of a serious thing. So there's a pretty good filtering mechanism for phonies, and but there will be people, like you said, who trickle out to Roman Catholicism or trickle out to whatever heresy.
There's also a general point to be made about nascent movements in general. Again, if you have something that's starting out, so in the US, for a long time, Orthodoxy was something that was done by immigrants, right, from Orthodox countries. So then you would start to get the trickle, right? And again, any nascent movement will start with people who are very serious about it, right? You can think of political ideologies, you can think of, social movements or something like that. But before it's popular, people will join it because they believe it. But then it starts gaining steam and gaining momentum. And as it continues to do so, that's when people who are there to grift on it start getting in, people who have their own ambitions. They start getting in. But then also there's another level of hurdles that arises when it becomes so popular, then that again, people come in by osmosis and aren't really serious about the whole thing. It's just the thing to do. That was a huge problem when the new atheists came up. You're Christian. Oh, I suppose so. You don't know anything about it. You haven't really thought about it. You haven't investigated anything. You just kind of are, because that's what people do. And then when you get challenged, you're on very weak footing. And I think that part of the reason why Orthodoxy is growing well in the US is that we're still pretty much in, maybe the grifters come in, but it's still pretty young in terms of converting people. So be prepared. You can't have this level of debate that Jay engages in, especially with the general public. It's not for everyone. Some topics may be, for certain segments of populations, and then, hey, I get the point about, Vatican II. I get the point about, faith versus works and stuff. But comprehensiveness is something you can only have the luxury of having in the early stages. Once it grows, it will stop being so well, defined and protected. So be prepared for that, and that's also, again, demons will use any single opportunity. If you remember the story with Saint Anthony the Great, a demon saying, you can't outfast me because I don't eat. You can't have more vigil than me because I don't sleep. What was it? But one thing you beat me at is, you don't have pride, which was a trap, basically, to get him to be proud. So anything, even great success in your spiritual advances will be used, let alone like your intellectual queries, your spiritual journey in its more nascent form. Just be aware that it's not just a simple schema that undergoes, and you have your little, notebook and you can check everything and now you're good. Now the demons don't have any way to get.
There's another layer to this as well that that is, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. The introduction of digital space and social media and the sort of ongoing 24/7 social engagement world that, once upon a time you just have physical space, and when you go interact with someone, it's typically you're like intentionally going out of your way to go to a physical place where a bunch of people are gathered, and then obvious physical constraints, there's limits to the number of people that can be there, and that colors the shape of the sorts of social interactions and the growth and organic emergence of movements and stuff. Now having this digital real estate that we can also engage in, that is in many ways it's a much more democratized, so you can get way more people who suddenly show up in some kind of weird niche space than before. that creates a whole new set of opportunities and challenges.
Well, it's something that Matt, you and I have talked about quite often with AI, and I know there's some prominent thinkers in the Orthodox space that are diligently against AI, and I can understand why, right? I think the people who are designing all of this stuff are full of demons. However, we can't stop it from being developed. We can't stop it from being proliferated. We can't stop it from being out in the public. What we can do, however, is inject Christ into it as much as possible, and not just any Christ. We're talking about Jesus Christ. We're not talking about Bob or Moishi Christ. We're talking about Jesus Christ and an Orthodox perspective. This gets us to what I've been starting to push for people. One is to model the prodigal son, to return, repent, and rebuild or redeem. The other being as a corollary to the vengeful son. The other being the full spectrum Orthodox dominance. Full spectrum Orthodox dominance, and that doesn't mean pushing it down people's throats. That means bring that level of separation from 6 degrees down to 2 degrees, where everyone in your family has some Orthodox people in there. They're going to people's houses and seeing some icons on the wall. You know, people have their prayer ropes. It's the accoutrement, right? There was someone who said, I think it might have been Saint. I'm blanking on the name, but whoever said it is that Orthodoxy is the most materialistic church in some ways. We have the most stuff, right? Like it's all about the things, but it's not the things that are inherently important. But in a materialistic world, I just saw a video clip, I think, on TikTok where some young girls like talking about get all your Orthodox stuff, right? Get your icon, get your this, get your that. I'm like, yeah, well, hey, if that works, it works. Like I think we're past the point of being clutching about who's using which icon or how they're obviously how they're using it and the let's say the intentions behind it are important, but getting it out there into public where everyone is seeing it is a powerful marketing tool, and we have to be part of the 21st century. It's no good thinking that we're somewhere in the second century and we're dealing with the second century problems. We're in the 21st century, and we better start acting like it. Which brings us to guys like Dyer, Andrew Wilson, other prominent members who are shaking things up, who are rattling trees, who are upsetting people. But it's like, yeah, it's 21st century. It's an upsetting world. Like you have what's the disturbing number we saw about two interesting quotes. One that's something like 3 out of 5 women in America have OnlyFans accounts or have been on OnlyFans.
I don't buy those. I don't buy those. But anything about OnlyFans, how much they earn and how many are on there, I think is there to be a trap for other women to think, so this is much more viable and popular than I thought. Jay, you're muted.
Well, the real study is where they did a peer-reviewed study that showed that 3 of those 5 accounts are almost always Pasha's sock accounts. By which I mean Posh wears a sock. By which I mean Posh is wearing a sock.
Do you think I'm sexy? Do you think I'm lovely? Come on, baby, let me know.
Just raking it in, lads. Sorry to all the lives I've destroyed, but hey, that's the world.
Hey, those curtains, those Serbian curtains are not cheap, folks. It's there you go.
The other ones are Indian guys from running AI accounts.
I love you very much. You are so masculine. Yeah, all the masculine accounts. Remember the masculine accounts that turned out all to be from India? And I think if someone knows the game, it's the Indian bros.
Those guys can grift like no one else.
Okay, sorry. I'm apologizing for the thought I had. I always have to make sure I don't go full bulk. And Jason, I talked to you about this before we went.
I gave you the green lights. Hey,
Yeah,
if this
you
is
don't
our
want to
if this
give me the
if this is our swan song on YouTube, let it be the swan song. Let us go out
listen,
in a blazing halo glory.
regular family discussions in Serbia are S tier Fed posting online. So I always have to keep myself.
Apparently, you are both voice maxing and looks maxing, Posh. So
Well,
take
that's
it back.
sad when he says it about me.
I don't know, he's telling on himself, really.
Right. So okay, we didn't go back to Sam Shamoun. I don't think he's a Fed.
He's too unhinged to be a Fed.
Yeah.
He'd have to be like a provocateur or something if he was a Fed.
Yeah, so he doesn't have the stability to be a Fed even in the capacity of a provocateur, because there's just no continuity other than being very angry at people. And I think that's much more easily ascribed to him being a Syrian than to being a plant.
Yeah.
Orb maxing is having the chat. Orb maxing.
Orb maxing, yeah. Just to be clear, that's a very popular thing in like paranormal activity circles. Like orbs are like, just bloody clean the place. What are you doing? It's basic lighting and dust particles. So, as someone who loves watching paranormal,
or maybe ghosts are just dusty. Maybe they don't clean up.
Maybe it's the ghosts who
the ghosts are ashy.
Platonism,
Exactly.
and Plato with his orbs and circle being perfect, and
it's all black ghosts and they're ashy.
You ashy. What is up? Casper's just ashy.
The N-word.
Ebony platonic ghosts. Wait. We can make
that BIPOC just ashy. Why don't you get your Casper ass in some lotion? See if you can clear that up. All of a sudden, you go from a white ghost to a black ghost. I can see you at night.
Who invited Jasmine Crockett?
Oh, dude.
Jason, I think that there's a problem with this panel. I think that you rigged it.
Oh,
I think you tilted the field.
That only you have a beard.
There's not enough people that think I'm Fed, or what?
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna have to take the pro Fed side. And
I'll take the pro Fed side. That's usually what I do.
Prove I'm a Fed.
Let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about the infiltration of ideology into the church, because one thing that Buck Johnson, the Mighty Buck Johnson, Buck the Stuff Johnson has said, is that Orthodoxy is a dialectic destroyer. That you bring these ideologies that are based on these dialectics into the church and basically it eradicates them. Father Turquoise has said something very, very similar. This seems to be the consternation where some of the early attacks, the BBC attacks on Father Moses McPherson, Buck Johnson, Father John Whiteford, was this inclusion. Now they're trying to attack on multiple levels, right? We're infiltrated by Russian spies, and we're anti-Semites, and all the evil white things, right? This, but yet when you're inside the church, you understand how it kind of destroys these ideologies from the inside out, because you can't hold a dialectical structure within the true church. It just doesn't work. So, any thoughts on that, gentlemen? The external attacks of, because I can understand somewhat from a materialistic viewpoint how, for example, there's glass ceilings for women in the church. They can't become priests. There's certain things they can't do. There's taboos. Of course, the church's stance on homosexuality or on lust in general. The idea that the Orthodox Church is the true Israel seems to fly in the face of certain groups. Any thoughts on that? So this continued external attack which I also think is driving people to the church in a weird way.
Yeah, I mean, there are right and wrong. There are situations and times where you have to take a true versus false position, but there's also false dialectics. Both things exist. So false dialectics, like, are you with the Zionists or are you with Hamas? Right? Are you? Do you believe in faith or you believe in works? Do you believe in grace? Do you believe in law? Do you believe in tradition or you believe in the Bible? A lot of what Americans, evangelicals, Protestants, are faced with is a lot of dialectics, and even Roman Catholics who, on those kinds of issues, do a little bit better than the Protestant evangelicals. Even they still kind of get caught up in some of the, well, if God's absolutely simple, he can't be, there can't be energies. That's also another kind of dialectic of absolute simplicity in God versus real multiplicity, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's always the potentiality for dialectics, even amongst more sophisticated Roman Catholic people. But for the majority of American kind of, evangelical minded people, it's just sad that so many things, even to the point of the fake two-party left-right Democrat Republican system, is dialectic. So people, that are having that whole boomer mind matrix of the false dialectics collapse are then starting to think, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's options that I'm not even familiar with that aren't Protestant or Papist. Maybe there's something Orthodox that's unique. St. Maximus says that, ever since the fall, we've kind of been caught up in dialectics, to speak metaphysically. And then ultimately Christianity then resolves a lot of these dialectics through the Trinity being, one and many, through there being synergy and harmony between church and state, ideally, not a battle. Man and women complement each other. They're not enemies. We're not feminist versus anti-feminist. We're true patriarchy where the, genders have true synthesis. So, yeah,
You can see
Orthodoxy just down the list, right? I mean, it just constantly dissolves these false dialectics.
you can see a lot of even the based politics guys themselves wind up just kind of being a continuation of this dialectic thinking, because they think that to be base is just to take the opposite of whatever the libs think.
Exactly.
And so then you wind up becoming a dogmatic anti-Zionist, or become a dogmatic anti-Semite, or a dogmatic anti-black or anti-woman or whatever. And you just create kind of like a negative liberalism, which is itself just a reflection of liberalism. You're still operating within that same frame.
Yeah, so much of the dissident right exactly fell into that, especially back to the 2016-17 alt-right era. People just fell into this, like, to the point where they started moving more and more towards progressivism. Oh, let's have UBI. Let's adopt, what was that guy's name? Chang,
Yang?
Andrew Yang.
Andrew
Yang
Yang.
Gang.
Yang's socialism and all
Yang
this.
Gang.
It just got so stupid. Yeah, let's even consider. Oh, maybe actually, what's the California guy? Maybe he's Bayes secretly.
Newsom?
Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, I mean, just stuff like what? Like,
Well, I
how's
think
the- how's
there's
a
these
pro-gay, Skittles abortion
Yeah.
guy gonna be Bayes? It's just, but that's the dissident right, like you said, just fell into this. I'll oppose anything for the sake of opposing it, and it just becomes nothing. So there's no. That's the problem with the Nietzschean right too, right? The Nietzschean right ends up just kind of being leftist.
Well, so part of my work has been talking about like sort of the liberal frame. This comes from Father Serafim's work in nihilism, and it's sort of an extension of that, where people kind of think liberalism is just the left, or just this, or libertarianism, or pick your group. I see it as one big giant frame that contains all these ideologies, because they all reduce down to nominalism, individualism, let's say post-enlightenment thinking in one way, shape, or form. There's different levers to it. So some ideologies turn up the crank on certain aspects and deaden others, but they all fall in the same frame. And that frame, and this is sort of also parallel thinking to Dugan, that's the frame you got to break. So in order to think outside of it, it's a major extraction, because you realize that your entire reality that you've grown up with in the West is a false reality. It's this liberal reality that it's nothing personal. You can choose to be whatever you want as long as it's liberal. This is why all world governments kind of look the same, right? Outside of a few notable exceptions. And even then, like, they're kind of in service. Saudi Arabia is in service of the liberal frame. It's not like, yes, they have a monarchy, but come on, right? So
You
when
don't think
you
it's traditionally Islamic to hold a Nigel Azalea concert in Riyadh? I think that's peak Sunni Islam.
or WWE events, as long as women are fully covered, right? They're in skin tight skin suits. As long as they're in skin tight skin suits, in cat suits, they're fine. They can perform. It's just don't bare a shoulder. That's
It was weird when I was in Turkey around 20 years ago or so, and it was kind of surreal traveling around the country and seeing how frequently I would see women wearing both full, complete head coverings, including just the slit for the eyes, with a miniskirt. It was like, what's happening here? Like,
Sounds like America during COVID, too.
yeah, that's true. It was a foreshadowing.
I think Turkey is number one in terms of the number of sexual partners people have. So Turkey has never been,
including
really,
cousins, because they're fine with that. So
yeah, they're not as bad as certain other ones, but they're bad. But Turkey isn't really that, and never has been, very traditionally Islamic, because they were too powerful to actually be restrained. So you have these people, these imams coming from Arabia, and like, well, you really, a lot of them have just mustaches, and like in Sunni Islam, you're supposed to shave off the mustache and just have a beard, or you can have a very, very thin mustache. And a lot of them just had mustaches, and they're like, okay, you go and tell the Sultan that, and good luck, because you're probably not coming back. So that's the thing with Turkey. But honestly, the House of Saud, a lot of these Gulf countries, they're not trad. It's very difficult to be very trad and just extraordinarily wealthy. That was the case with a lot of monarchies in Europe as well. But I think we again, the dichotomies we spoke about earlier, a lot of them stem from the fact that what is conservative or thought of as conservative in the West is modernism, and then liberalism is postmodernism. That's how I see it, right? So think about discussing the Bible and exegesis. Postmodernists say, well, you can never know what a word means. And then the modernist, the conservative position is, nope, you just know it. You just look at the word and you know what it means. That's it. Because we are so far gone from traditional Christian thinking that we are left with two modern ways of thinking. And I think that's why the discourse is so low level. I'm not sure how it will be fixed, or if it will be fixed. That's not mine to say. But honestly, if you're thinking for one single source of why things are so low level, it's because it's all modern. And modernism is not about thought. It's just about spinning around your presuppositions into whatever you think needs to be done. It's very like communists. They don't believe in truth. It's only materialism, So what you can be the biggest capitalist ever, as long as you just go after the revolution. The methodology might be in question. The telos, especially like the Fabians and such people, they don't care that you're going to sacrifice people. They're materialists. They're full materialists. They don't care about life or death. What matters is the religious truth that you have this progression of materialism, historic materialism. What I think that's a term that goes towards this utopia, and they will do anything not just gulags. They will become what's called in the Labour Party, the blue Labour and the Tony Blairs, who were one of the most radical people who have ever occupied the position of Prime Minister in Britain. But he managed to come off as a moderate. So he has done the worst things. He established the Supreme Court. Like, you think here, British Supreme Court, that's a thing from, I think, 2009. But if you think, oh, it's Britain and Supreme Court, that must be hundreds of years old. No. So he destroys everything, floods the country with immigrants, makes a pig's breakfast of British politics, and he's still seen as too right-wing for the Labour Party. That's how actual revolutionaries work.
Hey, Jason, I'm going to have to go ahead and check out. I appreciate having me.
No, absolutely, man. I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for Jay. Anyone last thoughts for Jay Dyer?
Conclusion, I'm a Fed, so I admit it.
Well, hopefully you're well fed.
There you
Even
go.
I have exposed that I'm a Fed, and I oppose me now. So
confess as though for your father, confess. I'm sorry.
He's officially on the Peter Thiel payroll, folks.
Yes.
But you can put me on your payroll by sending your money over to Streamlabs and PayPal. I appreciate you, Jay. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah.